This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. A cattle market update from Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel begins today's show. He talks about how the markets reacted to recent reports and how margins are tighter in certain parts of the industry. Romulo Lollato, K-State wheat production specialist, keeps the show moving as he discusses pre-planting wheat meetings and what topics will be covered. Ending the show is Sarah Lancaster, K-State weed specialist, explaining the proposed decision to approve registration for over-the-top Dicamba formulations. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Monday show with the cattle market update from Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel. Derrell, thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Great to be here.
Derrell, last week we talked about the cattle on feed report and the cattle inventory report, and how do we see it impact this past week's market?
You know, those reports were both basically pretty bullish. I mean, they confirmed that cattle numbers are getting tighter. We don't see any real definitive signs that we're retaining any heifers yet. So the markets reacted pretty positively and pretty strongly this week. Feeder cattle markets jumped sharply for the first part of the week. You know, by late in the week, the markets slowed down a little bit, I guess, would be from a futures market standpoint at least. Cash markets were extremely strong through the week. So, you know, we've been watching for so many months now for indications that we're saving some heifers, that we're going to lead to some herd rebuilding, and we just can't find any indication in any of this. And the good news is the signals are all pretty consistent. So, you know, it's not like we're not sure what the reports are telling us. They're telling us pretty clearly that we're just not saving any heifers yet.
Is retaining more heifers going to be the only thing that could change the market, or are there other things?
Well, that's the main thing. I mean, you know, herd rebuilding is a function of what we do on the heifer side and what we do on the cow culling side. Cow culling has been falling. It fell last year. It's falling this year down to a level that would be consistent with herd expansion. So the cow part, you know, we're screening these cows pretty well. We've dropped cow slaughter down to pretty minimal levels at this point. And for this year, the decrease in beef cow slaughter is probably enough to say that we'll stabilize the beef cow herd. We might even see it tick up just fractionally, given the number of bred heifers that we brought into the year. But that said, there's still no indication that we're actually saving heifers to rebuild the herd going forward. So we may stabilize this year, but prospects for any herd growth next year are pretty limited. And if we don't get started with some heifer retention here pretty quick, we're going to push it off even another year beyond that.
What are we seeing for boxed beef?
You know, summertime is usually a little bit weaker time period. The summer doldrums, if you will, the heat of the summer. Boxed beef has pulled back pretty sharply in the month of July from the late June, early, you know, pre 4th of July kinds of peaks. But that said, I don't think it's an indication that beef demand is really weakening. It's a seasonal thing. If you look across the cuts, you know, it's pretty typical that grilling kind of slows down a little bit in midsummer. I would expect to see this market stabilize as we get into August, and probably, you know, tick back up just slightly as we have a last summer surge of buying for the Labor Day weekend for the summer grilling season. So we'll see. I'm looking for this market to stabilize a little bit going forward. I don't see any indication yet that we've got any fundamental unraveling of beef demand at this point.
Is there anything uniquely happening right now with ground beef?
You know, one of the questions that what people have had, obviously, is just high prices. Will consumers push back? And we always think about, well, when beef prices get high, ground beef is kind of the go-to market. It's a favorite anyway, and it's usually our value product to go to. But when you look at how cow slaughter has decreased the last 2 years, and so the tightness of supply for beef trimmings has pushed that ground beef market up. And I recently took a look at how do wholesale trimmings markets compared to, say, steak markets. And so if you look at, 90% lean trimmings compared to ribeye wholesale values, since 2023, the trimmings price has gone up about 40%, while the ribeye price at the wholesale level has gone up about 13%. So ground beef is it's still going to be a cheaper product in absolute terms, but relatively speaking, ground beef is not as much of a value as it often is. Those trimmings prices are running about 38% of the wholesale value of ribeyes right now, and that's exactly what you would expect given how much those ground beef market components have decreased in the last couple of years.
Would you think that consumers are probably still purchasing it?
Oh, yeah. I think, ground beef is such a, base part of our market, not only from a grocery store standpoint, but obviously our whole, fast food industry. And really, when we think about beef demand and beef competition with other meats, a lot of that happens in the hamburger chains, if you will. And so, it's still a very important part of demand, and it's an important place where we still compete with, especially poultry. The drive-through window is usually a matter of a hamburger versus a chicken sandwich or something.
What does the balance look like then for cattle producers getting higher prices for the livestock, but also consumers having to pay more for that product?
Yeah, the nature of the market we're in is that we're pushing things higher from the bottom up. The lack of cattle is the basic driver here, and so and ultimately it does translate into higher prices for consumers. But generally, those retail prices don't go up as much or as fast as everything below them does. So that's why we've got a lot of margin issues in the beef industry. The cow-calf producer really is in the driver's seat right now. The market is offering these, phenomenal calf prices. But once you get above that level, everybody else is buying and selling some form of cattle or beef. And those margins are all being challenged right now to some extent. Obviously, the packers, most especially at this point, but ultimately retailers will feel part of it. And then eventually some part of that price increase gets passed on to consumers.
Derrell, do you have any concern that if our market shifts and we don't continue to see a rise in prices, those ones that could be dealing with tight margins could have more issues?
Yeah, I think the margin questions, we know packers have really been struggling through this. They've borne the brunt of this margin squeeze up until now. At some point in time, I think retailers will pick up a little bit more of it. And if these cattle, up until now, feedlots have actually done pretty well. But obviously the cost of feeder cattle to replace any cattle that a feedlot sells right now are extremely expensive. So if the market slows down, the rate of increase slows down, then those feedlots could see some of that margin issue as well. Now they're being helped out by the fact that feed prices are very attractive, and we're looking for a big corn crop this year. So we're probably going to continue to see some advantage for feedlots from a feed cost of gain standpoint. But boy, that buy-sell margin between feeder cattle and fed cattle is really wide right now, and it's only the time lag between the beginning and the end that's really saving feedlots.
And we talk a lot about risk management for our cow-calf producers, but anything that other portions of the industry should be thinking about?
Well, I think everybody in this industry has to recognize that, first of all, we're at record levels. That always makes you pretty vulnerable to shocks in the market. The broader external environment, macroeconomy, politics, and everything else is injecting a lot of volatility in these markets. So I think everybody has to be concerned with short-term shocks in the market. The fundamentals are still very strong, so we're probably okay. We don't see any indications of turning this market really, but at the same time, we're very vulnerable to a lot of shocks, and we're probably going to see some of that, continue to see that going forward. And producers need to do risk management to prepare against those shocks for whatever time period they have to make marketing decisions.
As we look forward and are starting to think maybe about wheat planting, what are some things that you might encourage cattle producers to consider?
Well, yeah, so it's early August now. Those producers in the southern plains that like to graze wheat will start thinking about planting certainly by late August. We'll think about it. So, one of the questions is just conditions. Are the soil temperatures too high or not to plant wheat? Do we have moisture conditions? And so on. So we'll be watching those conditions going forward. And so, planting wheat for that. again, the stocker operation is one of those margin operations that we talked about. And so producers, from a budget standpoint, really need to pencil out how those stocker margins, pencil out for them. Depending on what time of the fall they might get started with a stocker operation when they would be purchasing cattle relative to the end of that period next spring sometime. So there's a need for them to approach this pretty carefully because those margins are a little bit tricky right now.
As you look forward to the market, Derrell, what are you keeping your eye on?
We're still moving ahead. Fall of the year, calf prices normally show some seasonal decline. We haven't seen much of that this summer. It's still a possibility to see a little bit, but probably what it means is that calf prices might be more inclined to move sideways rather than to a seasonal low as we go into the fall. It looks like we're going to continue to see very strong prices there. And so, I think producers will want to take advantage of that in terms of the timing as well as, other marketing considerations for those calves this fall.
That was Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel. If you'd like to read more from Derrell, you can do so by checking out Oklahoma State University Extension's Cow-Calf Corner newsletter. You can find it by following the link in today's show notes on agtoday.net or by searching for Oklahoma State Cow-Calf Corner newsletter. If you would like to subscribe to their weekly newsletter, you can do so by emailing Derrell at derrell.peel@okstate.edu. That is DERRELL@okstate.edu. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing some upcoming wheat pre-plant meetings with K-State wheat production specialist Romulo Lollato. Romulo, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby. It's always great to be here.
Romulo, what are these pre-plant meetings?
So, Shelby, this time of the year is the time of the year when growers are making a lot of decisions of what's going to happen in season of the next wheat crop, right? And what we try to do in these pre-plant meetings is really give growers a refresher of the different topics, right? Different things that they need to be thinking about as they go into the season. So, of course, during this time, one of the things that is in everybody's minds is variety selection, which varieties to plant, right? And many growers are actually managing a number of different fields that are in different phases of the rotation, or perhaps they follow different crop rotations. And we try to contextualize that, right? So, okay, you're going to select a variety. Where are you in the state? What are the cropping systems that this variety is going to be exposed to in your farm? And so you can actually start filtering down based on, of course, the adaptability of that variety and the yield performance in the region. And once we have, a few good candidates, then we filter it down based on those agronomic traits. So, okay, well, here we have about, for this region, 6 or 8 varieties that have been very consistent yield performing varieties. And so, are you going after corn? Okay, so you can filter that further and just have a couple of good candidates. Are you going after soybeans? Are you going after wheat? Is it a long fallow? Are you looking for tall variety for residue? So we were going to discuss all of these things that growers are managing now. And we also help to contextualize with other in-season decisions, right? So, for example, are you willing to put a foliar fungicide there next April or May if we need to? If the answer is no, then we need to look for varieties with good resistance to fungal diseases, right? And so that's one thing that we try to do at this point is really review a lot of the data that we have from K-State on variety performance. How did things shake out this very last year, and how does that compare with previous years? But also, we talk about many other things that are important for growers. I'll give you a couple of examples, right? Fertility management. Okay, well, we're usually managing a system, not only managing a crop. And the wheat is a really good phase of that system to do a lot of that management. I'll give you an example. You're under no-till and you're needing to build up soil phosphorus. Well, probably the wheat phase of the rotation is the phase of the rotation to do that for a few reasons, right? First, it's a narrow row spacing. And so you can get a much better distribution of that soil phosphorus by putting it in the wheat phase of the rotation rather than putting it in corn or beans that are much more widely spaced. With that, you can also, it's one of the crops that is the most responsive to soil phosphorus that we grow. And so there's another reason to put the phos higher in that phase of the rotation. So we discussed many of these things that are management related, that go just beyond what they do in the wheat season. But of course, focus on that season's decision, variety, which varieties to plant, how to manage the crop from an agronomic perspective, whether it is, I just mentioned phosphorus, but it may be nitrogen, it may be sulfur, it may be foliar fungicides as well. So yeah, we do discuss a number of different things that might be on growers' minds right now and how to make the most out of your buck in each piece of land that you manage.
What is currently maybe a hot topic when it comes to wheat and something that people might want to consider when it comes to variety selection?
Well, yeah, absolutely. If we think of last season, wheat streak mosaic, right? That was the hottest topic that we had last season. And for a reason, I don't think I have been into 10 wheat fields last season that did not have any wheat streak mosaic. So a very high incidence and in some cases, very high severity of the disease as well. And in all of these pre-plant meetings, we're going to have Dr. Kelsey Anderson-Onofre joining us. And she's an expert in plant diseases, and she's going to give an overview. Why did we have such a bad outbreak? What can we do to manage it next year? And again, it's all about situational awareness, right? Knowing where each field that we have is. So if we're planting a field that we have a neighbor that is not controlling volunteer, right? Or that we have cover crops that are planted early, like a winter triticale or a winter rye that is planted early in August sometime, that can also harbor that disease and is in a nearby field. So there's a number of things that increase the risk of a given field to have wheat streak mosaic. And in that situation, it would be advised for us to take as many precautions as we can. And we discussed those in these pre-plant meetings. A few precautions, for example, one, variety selection. We do have two different types of resistance to help us control wheat streak mosaic. One of them is resistance against the virus itself. The other is resistant against the vector. And then there are varieties that simply handle it better. We don't know what they have, but it's some type of background tolerance that they seem to handle heavier infections better than others. And so we discussed those things. We also might discuss, for example, opportunity for delaying and planting of that field, right? So if you know a given field is a high risk, well, let's go out and plant other fields first and leave this one for last with a variety that is tolerant or resistant to the virus, right? So these pre-plant meetings, I think, is an awesome opportunity for us to really give a refresher for growers in everything that they need to be thinking about, give an update on our current research and what are we finding across the state in terms of crop responses to management and variety selection and whatnot, and an update on these hot topics like the wheat streak mosaic. So yes, a number of different opportunities coming up that growers can join us in their own backyard, right? Well, not literally in the backyard, but in a nearby town where we'll be having these meetings discussing many of these important topics.
Will there be other people joining you and Kelsey?
Well, it depends, right? Each meeting is different according to what the county agent is organizing. We have some meetings where we're going to do a pretty complete program, but from, perhaps even having Alan Fritz, the wheat breeder, joining us, and then he would be discussing variety selection for those regions, with then Kelsey discussing disease management and with a focus on wheat streak mosaic. In those cases, then I would be probably discussing some type of agronomic management, whether it is the fertility piece or a fungicide piece or so on. And in some cases, we even have area agronomists joining us, giving an overview of what's important in their own region, right? So, for example, Logan Simon joining us in some of these more Southwest schools and doing some discussions about cover crops and more conservational type systems in those wheat-based conservation practices in those wheat-based systems. So it kind of really depends. Some of them, it's kind of like we have fewer speakers. It might be just Kelsey and I, or it might be just Kelsey and Alan, right? It really depends on the school. But again, the overall goal is give it a refresher, be thinking about varieties to choose now in the context of what are you willing to manage during the season, and expand from there. And more than anything, right? All of these meetings come with a good meal to them, right? So if nothing else, go for the opportunity to interact, network, and have a good meal. But during these times, also have one-on-one conversation with us, right? Farmers are out there in their trucks and in tractors and doing things all day long and sometimes they have so many good questions that come up that we're not even thinking about. And these pre-planned meetings are a great opportunity for farmers to bring those questions up. Maybe we have the answer for them. Maybe we don't, but if we don't, we're going to get thinking about it. And have one-on-one interactions with us. Specialists from campus will come to your local unit there and have an opportunity for one-on-one conversations and catching up.
When are these meetings taking place?
So there are a number of meetings that are already set, right? So, for example, in August 11th, we're going to have a meeting in Clearwater. That starts it's going to be an evening meeting. And again, contact your county agent there to make sure that you have all the directions for that. On August 20th, we have a Wheat RX meeting in Pratt. And that's a fairly complete meeting. It's a morning one. It's going to start early on. The Kansas Wheat Commission is going to be involved with that one as well. And we're going to end with lunch. So that's a fairly complete program. It's a full morning one, again, starting with breakfast, ending with lunch. Then we have on August 21st, we have one in Salina. It's a morning one as well, kind of like a mid-morning ending with lunch. Then we have on August 25th, in the morning, we're finalizing the plans to have one in Abilene. And again, on August 25th, in the evening, then we are starting with the McPherson one around 6:30 p.m. So the McPherson one is typically very well attended. The Clearwater one is typically very well attended as well. The ones that we have done in Abilene and Salina have all been well attended also. We have not had one in Pratt in a while, so I'm looking forward to what that's going to turn out and hoping that we do have a good show up out there, since it is a very important wheat growing region that has been getting hammered by wheat streak mosaic in the last couple of years, or drought, right? So, yes, definitely a number of opportunities there. We're also discussing with the ag agent to put a few in others. So, for example, we are discussing now to have one in Great Bend. The date is still to be determined on that one, as well as one in Hayes. So again, a few opportunities there for growers to join us and have some good discussions about hot topics that are upcoming right now and management decisions for the coming season.
Romulo, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shelby. Always great to be here with you.
That was K-State Wheat Production Specialist Romulo Lollato. If you'd like to find out more information about these meetings, you can do so by contacting your local extension agent or by checking out the Agronomy eUpdate at eUpdate.agronomy.ksu.edu. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Monday show talking with K-State weed specialist Sarah Lancaster. Sarah, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Shelby.
Sarah, wanting to talk about a recent Agronomy eUpdate article that you put out titled Proposed Decision for Over-the-Top Dicamba Formulations. And when we say proposed decision, what does that mean?
So with every herbicide, there's a stepwise process that has to be gone through in order to get that full federal label that we want to have the applications be legal. And so they typically will put out a proposed label and then open it up for a comment period. And so that's kind of where we are. This one is a little bit different than most in that the document that the EPA released last week, it really goes through some of the environmental data and the human health data that kind of justifies their decisions. And then it has a list of proposed mitigations. There is no actual label yet.
If it's going to become a label, how much longer would it potentially be?
At least, I would say 3 to 6 months. We have to have this 30-day comment period that we're just at the very beginning of. And then the EPA will take some time to review that feedback. And then the EPA, because these new dicamba labels will have to be compliant with the Endangered Species Act, that means the EPA's herbicide strategy is being gone through at this point. And so that means that after this comment period, there will still be a consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Services to make sure that the mitigations that the EPA is proposing are going to be enough to ensure that we're not causing unnecessary harm.
If this goes through, what would it mean for farmers?
At some point in the future, we are likely to see a return of herbicide labels for applications of dicamba-containing products over the top of soybean and cotton.
Is there anything farmers can be doing right now if they think this is a good or potentially bad idea?
Yeah, so part of this public comment period means that the public can comment. And so obviously all of our ag advocacy groups, those guys all have a vested interest in this, and they will issue detailed comments on behalf of their membership. But also, the EPA values feedback from farmers that says, this is how I would use this new product in my farming operation. This is how it will help me. And then if you look at that document and you see the list of mitigations that they have proposed, farmers could go through and say, this is how this mitigation is workable for me. This is why this mitigation is not going to be workable for me in my geography and my farming operation. So the EPA thus far through this process of complying with the Endangered Species Act, I've been pleased with how much they've taken feedback from industry groups, from academics as a whole. So it's been a lengthy process, but I think that has actually worked out in our favor for the most part.
If people want to find out more information on this, what's your recommendation?
So, they can look at the eUpdate that we put out last Thursday. And in that eUpdate, there's a link to the regulations.gov website where the docket is the terminology the EPA and the Federal Register uses to talk about this. So that docket will have the document that is this proposed mitigations. When they open that document, the first 2/3 of it is a lot of environmental studies and human health studies and that kind of thing. And then the very end of the document is where they talk about the proposed mitigations. The other thing we should say about this, Shelby, at the very end of the document, one of the things that the EPA states pretty clearly is that they're still negotiating with the registrants, so Bayer, BASF, and Syngenta, to make sure that the labels are aligned. So the last time we saw these labels approved, there were some differences in application cutoffs and some other kind of minor things like that. And so the EPA is working to make that label language more consistent between those three. So at some point, we will see the actual proposed labels. At this point, we've just got proposed mitigations, though.
That was K-State weed specialist Sarah Lancaster. I will link the resources that she mentioned in today's show notes on agtoday.net. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.